I found out the way you find out about the worst things, not in a dramatic confrontation, not with someone sitting you down and preparing you for what they're about to say, but sideways, accidentally, in the middle of something ordinary. I was on the phone with my mother discussing Thanksgiving logistics, half listening while I sorted through a week's worth of mail on the kitchen counter, when she said, in the same tone she used to discuss grocery lists and weather forecasts, "Oh, and the cello situation worked out beautifully. The Hargrove family was thrilled. Such a lovely outcome for everyone." I stopped sorting mail. "What cello situation?" I said. A pause. The particular pause of someone who has just understood that they have said something they were not supposed to say to someone who is not supposed to know yet. Elena's cello, darling. We found a buyer, a very serious collector, the Hargrove family. They have a son who plays professionally, and You sold Elena's cello, I said. Not a question. The words arranged themselves in my mouth before my understanding had fully caught up with them, the way the body sometimes moves faster than the mind in moments of shock, the sentence forming and leaving before I had consciously decided to say it. "We discussed this," my mother said, which was not the same as yes, but was also not a denial, and the gap between those two things was where the full magnitude of what had happened lived. "You did not discuss this with me," I said. Another pause. Longer this time. "Elena agreed," she said. "She signed the transfer documentation herself. She's 18. She's an adult." I put the phone down on the counter and stood in my kitchen and looked at the mail I had been sorting and felt the particular vertigo of a person whose understanding of recent events has just been completely rearranged. My daughter's cello was gone. Let me tell you what that means. Not the instrument. Not the specific monetary value, though the monetary value was real and substantial, and we will get to that. Let me tell you what the cello was before I tell you what they did with it, because the what it was is the whole story. And without it, none of the rest makes sense. My name is Claire Ashworth, 39 years old. Music teacher at a private academy, formerly a professional cellist who had toured regionally for 6 years before a repetitive strain injury in my late 20s ended the performing career and redirected me toward teaching. I had made my peace with this redirection, not easily and not quickly, but genuinely. And what I had retained from the performing years was a love of the instrument that was not contingent on my ability to play it professionally. The cello was not just what I did, it was a language I thought in. My daughter Elena was 18 and had been playing since she was 5, not because I pushed her. This is important and I want to be clear about it. I offered, the way you offer a child a language by speaking it near them, and she reached for it herself. By the time she was 10, she had surpassed what I could teach her, and I had found her a real teacher, a woman named Dr. Patricia Ng, who had performed with 3 major orchestras and who had told me, with the careful honesty of someone who does not offer praise cheaply, that Elena had the kind of natural architecture that you could not teach and could only recognize and cultivate. Elena had been cultivating it for 13 years. She was at the point in her musical development where she had applied to 3 conservatories, been accepted to 2, and was 3 months from beginning the next chapter of her life as a serious musician. The cello she played was not the cello I had bought her when she was 5. That cello, a small student instrument full of nicks from years of learning, was in a closet somewhere, retired with appropriate ceremony. The cello Elena played now had belonged to my grandmother. Her name was Rosalind Ashworth, known to 4 generations of the family as Gran, and she was 91 years old and lived 40 minutes from my house in a small, immaculate apartment that she maintained with the fierce domestic competence of a woman who had been maintaining things her entire life. She had played cello herself, not professionally but seriously, the way people of her generation pursued music before the categories of professional and amateur became so rigidly separated. She had played in a chamber ensemble for 30 years, had taught lessons from her living room for 2 decades, had the particular relationship to the instrument that comes from a lifetime of regular practice. Her cello had been made in Italy in 1887 by a luthier, whose name I cannot spell, but whose work, Gran had told me once, was recognized by people who knew what they were looking at. It was not a famous instrument. It was a very good one. Gran had given the cello to Elena on her 14th birthday. Not loaned, given with full deliberateness and a ceremony that Gran had planned carefully. She had sat Elena down and played the instrument one last time, a piece of Bach that she had been playing for 60 years, and then she had handed it over and said, "This belongs to you now. It always should have." Elena had played it every day since. She had auditioned to both conservatories on it. She had been accepted to both conservatories on it. It had sold for $100,000. The Hargrove family's son played professionally, my mother had said. They were serious collectors. The price was real. A 19th century Italian cello in this condition, with its provenance, was worth what they had paid and possibly more. The buyer knew what they were buying. My parents knew what they were selling. The pool was my sister's idea. My sister Dana had 3 children between the ages of 7 and 12 who had decided, with the unified conviction of children who have seen something they want, that a swimming pool was the next necessary feature of their family's life. Dana's husband, Marcus, made a comfortable salary, and Dana did not work outside the home, and they had a yard that could accommodate a pool, and they had decided they wanted one. And the quote they had received was $98,000. And the math had apparently been straightforward from there. My parents had sold my grandmother's cello to fund my sister's swimming pool. I want to describe my parents accurately because this story is not simple, and they are not simply villains. And the truth is more complicated than villainy, and in some ways, harder to address. My parents, Robert and Margaret Ashworth, 67 and 65, were the kind of people who had always operated on the principle that family resources were family resources, that what belonged to one Ashworth could and should be mobilized for the benefit of any Ashworth who needed it, that the boundary between mine and ours was a concept that applied to outsiders and not to blood. This principle had served them well enough when the resources were their own. It had become something else when it expanded to cover resources that were not theirs to mobilize. They had always favored Dana. I had known this since I was approximately 8 years old, and I had made my peace with knowing it in the imperfect, ongoing way that you make peace with something that doesn't resolve, but becomes less acutely painful over years. Dana was the easier child. Warmer toward my parents in the specific ways they found rewarding, less independent, less likely to disagree, more likely to spend Sunday afternoons at their house rather than at a recital or a lesson or in the particular absorbed solitude of a child who has found the thing she is for. I was the more difficult child. I was the one who wanted things my parents didn't fully understand and who pursued them with a focus they found simultaneously impressive and inconvenient. I loved them. They loved me. The favoritism was real and unspoken, and we had arrived, over decades, at a functional equilibrium that required me to hold certain things lightly. I had been holding too many things lightly for too long. After I put down the phone, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time. Elena was at school. She was finishing her senior year, 3 months from graduation, going to the Caldwell Conservatory in September. Her future assembled with the particular care of a young person who has been working toward a single clear point for a long time. She did not know I was sitting at this table. She had apparently signed transfer documentation herself, my mother had said. She is an adult, my mother had said. I called Elena. She answered on the 3rd ring with the slightly cautious, "Hi, Mom," of someone who is not sure why they are being called in the middle of a school day. "The cello," I said. Silence. Then, "Oh, tell me," I said. What Elena told me over the next 20 minutes was the version of events as she had understood them. And her version of events was different from the story I had been forming since my mother's phone call, not in the outcome, but in the mechanism. Elena had not agreed to sell the cello. What she had agreed to, she thought, was to have it appraised. My mother had called her 3 weeks ago and said that they had been contacted by a collector who was interested in knowing what the cello was worth and that it would be good information to have for insurance purposes, and could Elena sign a form that authorized the appraisal. Elena had signed the form. She had not read it with the attention it deserved. She was 18 and it was a form, and her grandmother had given her the cello, and she trusted that appraisal authorization meant appraisal authorization. The form had authorized transfer of ownership. They tricked her, I said. Out loud to no one. Elena had continued speaking, but I had stopped hearing her words and was hearing the sentence I had just said. They tricked her. My parents had asked my 18-year-old daughter to sign a form under a false description and had used her signature on that form to sell an instrument that her great-grandmother had given her. "Mom," Elena said, "are you there?" "Yes," I said. "Elena, listen to me. Did you know the cello was being sold?" "No," she said. Her voice had gone quiet. I really thought it was just an appraisal. I would never... Mom, that cello is... I play it every day. I was going to take it to Caldwell in September. I would never... "I know," I said. "I know that. This is not on you. Do you understand me? This is not on you." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, in the careful voice of someone who is trying very hard to hold themselves together, "Gran doesn't know yet, does she?" I closed my eyes. "No," I said. "Not yet." "She's going to be devastated," Elena said. I thought about Gran, about Rosalind Ashworth, 91 years old, who had played that cello for 60 years and had given it to her great-granddaughter with the deliberateness of a final, meaningful act, who had sat Elena down and played Bach and transferred something that mattered more than money. "I need to tell her before she finds out another way," I said. "Do you want me to come?" Elena said. "Come after school," I said. "I'm going now." I got my coat and my keys and drove to Gran's apartment. Gran's apartment was on the 3rd floor of a small building that she had lived in for 19 years, since Granddad died and the house became too large. The building was quiet and well-maintained, the kind of place that older people with standards choose, and Gran's apartment within it had the particular quality of a space that has been lived in with intention. Every object chosen, nothing arbitrary, the accumulated careful choices of a long life with definite aesthetic opinions. There were photographs on every surface, not randomly, but arranged with the eye of someone who understood composition. There were books in every room. There was a music stand in the corner of the living room, still, though Gran no longer played. It had been there since she moved in, and she had told me once that she kept it because a room without a music stand felt to her like a room with something missing. The cello had lived in the corner of that room for 30 years. Its absence was not visible to me now because it had been with Elena for 4 years, but I felt the absence anyway. The ghost of its presence in the space where Gran had practiced and taught and played. I rang the bell. She buzzed me in. She was waiting at her apartment door when I came up the stairs. She always waited at the door, had always done this, and I did not know whether it was because she heard the elevator or because she simply assumed that anyone coming was worth going to the door for. She looked at my face and said, "Come in, sweetheart." I came in. She led me to the living room. She moved carefully. Gran, with the deliberate gait of someone who has made an agreement with their body to keep going and holds up their end of it, and we sat on the sofa she had had for 40 years, the one upholstered in a fabric the color of old moss, and she looked at me with the absolute attention of a woman who has been paying attention to people for 91 years and knows what she is looking at. "Tell me," she said. I told her. I told her all of it. My mother's phone call, the form Elena had signed, the Hargrove family, the $100,000, the pool. I told her clearly and without softening it because Gran did not like to be softened at and because she deserved the full truth. I watched her face as I spoke. It did not break. It did not collapse. It did not do any of the things that I had feared it would do on the drive over, the things that had made my hands tight on the steering wheel. It went still, very still, with the particular stillness of someone who is receiving something large and is holding it carefully before deciding how to respond. When I finished, Gran was quiet for a long moment. I waited. She reached over and put her hand over mine on the sofa cushion between us. Her hand was small and very warm and had the particular quality of old hands. the prominent veins, the thin skin, the residual strength of decades of work and practice. She held my hand for a moment, and then she looked at me, and her expression was not what I expected. Not devastation, not the particular grief of someone who has lost something irreplaceable. Something else, something that lived in the neighborhood of sorrow but was not consumed by it. "Don't worry, sweetheart," she said. "That cello was—" She stopped. She looked at me with an expression that contained a decision. "Come with me," she said. "There's something I need to show you." She led me to the bedroom, the small, immaculate room that smelled of the particular lavender she had used her entire life, where the bed was made with hospital precision, and the dresser held 4 framed photographs and a ceramic dish with her watch and rings. She went to the wardrobe, not the main doors, the lower drawer, the deep one at the bottom that I had never had reason to look in, that I associated vaguely with the out-of-season items that older people keep in bottom drawers. She opened it. She moved aside a folded blanket and a box of letters I recognized as the ones from my grandfather, the ones she had kept tied with a blue ribbon since 1987. Underneath these, wrapped in a cloth that had once been part of a dress I remembered from childhood, a soft gray wool, was a document folder. She took it out and brought it to the bed and sat down and patted the space beside her. I sat. She opened the folder. Inside were documents. A letter from a law firm I did not recognize, dated 14 months ago. A certificate of authenticity from a luthier in Cremona, Italy, the most significant city in the world for string instrument making, the city where Stradivari had worked. A valuation document from an auction house whose name I recognized because it was the auction house that handled significant instrument sales internationally. I picked up the valuation document. I read it once. I set it down and read it again. "Gran," I said. "Yes," she said. "This says—" "Yes," she said. I looked at her. "The cello that you gave Elena," I said carefully, "was not the cello." "The cello I gave Elena," Gran said, with the precision of someone who has been waiting a long time to explain something and is choosing their words with care, was a very fine Italian instrument made in 1887 by a maker named Gesualdo Ferretti, whose work is respected and valued and was worth, at the time of the sale, approximately the price your parents received for it. She paused. "It was not, however, the cello your grandfather gave me in 1961. I sat very still. "The cello your grandfather gave me in 1961, Gran said, "was also made in Italy in 1701. By a maker named Antonio Stradivari." The bedroom was very quiet. Outside the window, a pigeon moved along the ledge with its small, purposeful steps and then was gone. "Gran," I said. "He bought it before we were married," she said. "He had inherited some money from his uncle. Not a large inheritance. But he was careful with it, and he made one decision with it that I told him at the time was extravagant, and that he told me was an investment. He was right, as he was about most things." She said this with the particular smile of someone remembering a person who has been gone for a long time. "I played it for 40 years. It was the instrument I played in the ensemble, the one I gave lessons on, the one that was in this room." She looked at the music stand in the corner. "When Elena was born, I knew. I knew when I held her, when she was 3 days old. I knew she was the one it should go to eventually. I watched her grow up. I watched her choose the cello for herself without being directed. I watched her become serious, and when she was 14, I gave it to her." "But you gave her the Ferretti," I said. "I gave her the Ferretti," Gran said, "because she was 14, and the Stradivarius required a particular level of readiness, not technical readiness. Elena has been technically ready since she was 16. I mean the other kind, the readiness to understand what you are holding, to hold something extraordinary without being overwhelmed by what it is." She paused. "I planned to give it to her when she left for conservatory, in September. That was always the plan." I looked at the valuation document in my hands. I looked at the figure at the bottom, the assessed current market value provided by the auction house 14 months ago for insurance purposes, The Stradivarius cello was valued at between $4 and $7 million, depending on market conditions at time of sale. I set the document down. I put my hands in my lap and looked at them and thought about my parents and the Hargrove family and the $100,000 and the swimming pool. I thought about the form Elena had signed and the word appraisal and the particular calculation that my parents had made, that the cello was valuable but not so valuable that anyone would look too closely, that Elena was young and trusting and would not read the fine print, that I would be upset but would absorb it as I had absorbed everything else. They had not known about the Stradivarius. They had sold the instrument they knew about and gotten what they thought was a significant sum, and they had not known, because Gran had told no one, because Gran was a woman who understood that information in the wrong hands was not safe, that the instrument they had actually wanted, the one that had been in this apartment for 60 years, was wrapped in gray wool in the bottom drawer of a wardrobe, undisturbed. "No one knows," I said. "You know," Gran said, "and Elena will know, and a lawyer in this city knows, and a luthier in Cremona knows, and an auction house in London knows, because I needed those people to know for the documentation to be complete." She looked at me. "But your parents do not know, and the Hargrove family does not know, and the world does not know." "What do you want to do with it?" I said. Gran folded her hands in her lap. She looked at me with the expression of a woman who has been thinking about a question for longer than I have been aware the question existed. "I want to give it to Elena," she said. "In September, as I always planned. I want to put it in her hands the morning she leaves for Caldwell and tell her what it is, and watch her understand." She paused. "But first, I think we need to address what your parents did. Not for the money, not for us, for Elena. What they did to Elena must be addressed." "They tricked her into signing a transfer document," I said. "They committed fraud," Gran said, quietly, without drama, stating a fact. "Elena signed a document under false pretenses. That is fraud. I am 91 years old, and I have been patient for a very long time, with a great many things, and I have no patience left for people who commit fraud against my great-granddaughter." I looked at her. "I want to call the lawyer," she said. "Now, if you're willing. I've been meaning to update him on the situation anyway, and this seems like an appropriate moment." I thought about my parents, about Robert and Margaret Ashworth, who had sold my daughter's cello for a swimming pool and believed they had gotten away with something, about my mother's voice on the phone saying the cello situation worked out beautifully, about Dana's children who would presumably be swimming in their new pool by summer. "Call him," I said. The lawyer's name was Frederick O'Say, a man Gran had worked with for 12 years on estate matters, who had the particular combination of legal precision and genuine human engagement that made him someone you trusted with complicated things. He came to Gran's apartment the following morning, came himself, not a junior associate, which told me something about how he regarded her. He was 55, tall, with the quality of stillness that some people develop over years of sitting with other people's serious problems. He sat across from Gran and me in the living room and listened to the full account. He had already known about the Stradivarius. He had been part of the documentation process 14 months ago, and he listened to the account of the sale of the Ferretti with the attentive neutrality of someone gathering facts before forming conclusions. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "The transfer documentation. You said Elena believed she was signing an appraisal authorization." "That's what my mother told her," I said. "And Elena's understanding at the time of signing was that the document authorized an appraisal, not a sale." "Yes. Then the document was obtained by misrepresentation," he said, "which makes the transfer voidable. The sale to the Hargrove family may be more complicated. They may be bona fide purchasers if they had no knowledge of the misrepresentation. But the transfer from Elena and the role of your parents in facilitating it is actionable." "What does actionable mean in practice?" I said. "It means," Frederick said carefully, "that Elena has grounds to seek rescission of the transfer and recovery of the sale proceeds. It means that your parents, who appear to have orchestrated the misrepresentation for their own financial benefit, face civil liability. It means that if the matter is pursued, the $100,000 that went toward your sister's pool becomes a sum that needs to be returned with interest, and the legal costs of recovering it are an additional consequence for the people who created the situation. He looked at Gran. What would you like to do, Rosalind? Gran was quiet for a moment. In the quiet, from somewhere in the building, there was the distant sound of music. Someone's radio, something orchestral, too faint to identify. She listened to it for a moment, and then she said, I want Elena to have what she is owed. I want the record to be clear. I do not want a war with my family. I'm 91, and I don't have the energy for a war, and I don't think a war produces the right outcome. But I want consequences. I want your parents, she said to me, to understand fully and precisely what they did and what it cost. And if they can't return the money, I said, if Dana and Marcus have already contracted for the pool, then they need to uncontract for the pool, Gran said simply, or your parents need to find another way to make it right. That is not our problem to solve for them. That is their problem, which they created. Frederick nodded. I'll prepare a formal demand letter, he said. It will go to your parents, with a copy to the Hargrove family's attorney, notifying them that the provenance of the instrument may be subject to legal challenge. It will lay out the situation precisely: the misrepresentation, the voidable transfer, and the demand for restitution. They'll have 30 days to respond. Do it, Gran said. Elena came that evening. She sat on the moss-green sofa in Gran's living room, and Gran held both of her hands and told her about the demand letter, about the misrepresentation, about the legal process that had been set in motion. Elena listened with the focused attention she brought to everything that mattered. When Gran finished, Elena was quiet for a long moment. I should have read the form, she said. You were deceived, Gran said. Reading more carefully does not prevent deception by people who intend to deceive you. Don't take that on. Elena looked at her great-grandmother. They had always had this quality between them, a directness, a mutual recognition. Gran had seen Elena clearly since she was an infant, and Elena, growing up in the field of that seeing, had learned to be herself more completely around Gran than around almost anyone else. I have something to tell you, Gran said. Something I had planned to tell you in September, but that the current situation makes relevant now. She told her about the Stradivarius. I watched Elena's face as Gran explained. The 1701 date, Stradivari's name, the 60 years in this apartment, the plan that had always existed to give it to Elena when she left for Caldwell. I watched the information arrive and settle and become real. Elena was not a person who performed emotions. She felt them fully, and they moved across her face with the honesty of someone who has never learned to conceal them. She was very still for a long time after Gran finished. Then she said, Gran, you've had a Stradivarius in your apartment this entire time. In the bottom drawer, Gran said, under a blanket. Something crossed Elena's face that might, in another register, have been laughter. Gran, she said again. I am a practical woman, Gran said. The safest place for something is often the most ordinary one. Elena looked at the wardrobe. She looked at Gran. Can I? She said. Could I see it? Gran looked at me. I nodded. Gran got up, slowly with the care of her 91 years, and went to the wardrobe and opened the bottom drawer. She moved the blanket and the letters and the gray wool bundle, and she brought it to the living room and set it on the coffee table. Elena unwrapped it herself, slowly, with the particular reverence of a musician handling something that deserves reverence. The cello emerged from the gray wool with the unhurried, specific reality of a thing that has been waiting patiently for its moment. It was not the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. It was old, visibly old, with the particular amber darkness of 300 years of varnish and use, with the marks of a long life of being played. It was not showy. It was not the instrument of someone who wanted to impress. It was the instrument of someone who had spent 3 centuries producing sound, and the sound it had produced was layered into it in the way that use layers into everything that is used well. Elena held it. She did not play it. Not yet, not in this moment. She just held it, and Gran sat beside her on the moss-green sofa, and the room was very quiet. "In September," Gran said, "when you leave, that's when it becomes yours properly. Until then it lives here, in the drawer, where it has always been perfectly safe." Elena looked at her. "I don't know what to say," she said. "You don't need to say anything," Gran said. "You need to practice. And in September, you need to arrive at Caldwell with this instrument and play it, and anyone who hears you will understand everything that needs to be understood." The demand letter went out on a Thursday. My parents received it on a Friday morning, and I know this because my mother called me at 8:47 on Friday, which was the earliest she had ever called me in my adult life. I let it ring. She called again. I let it ring again. She called a third time, and I picked up because I was done avoiding things that needed to be faced. "Claire," she said. Her voice was tight, with the specific tightness of someone who is frightened and is covering the fear with indignation. "We received a letter from a lawyer this morning." "I know," I said. "You know," she said. You went to a lawyer about a family matter, about something that was handled within the family for the benefit of the family." "You sold Elena's cello," I said. "You had her sign a transfer document by telling her it was an appraisal authorization. That is fraud, Mom. Frederick used that word specifically, and it is the correct word." "We thought," she started. "What?" I said. "What did you think?" A pause. "We thought she'd understand," she said. "Eventually, that it was for the family, that Dana's children needed." "The pool has been planned for 2 years, Claire. The children have been talking about it for 2 years, and we had the opportunity to make it happen, and you sold my grandmother's gift to my daughter to build a swimming pool," I said. The word swimming pool landed in the silence between us and stayed there. "It wasn't just a pool," my mother said, but her voice had lost some of its indignation and was finding something else underneath it. The thing underneath, which was not defiance, but discomfort. The discomfort of someone who has done something they cannot fully defend and knows it. "The letter gives you 30 days to return the sale proceeds," I said. $100,000, which you need to recover from however you've spent it or plan to spend it. If the pool contract has been signed, you need to find another way. If the pool has been partially built, you need to find another way. This is the situation you created, and I am telling you clearly that it will resolve with Elena receiving what she is owed. How you manage that is your problem." "You would do this to your family," my mother said. And the word family was doing the work it always did in my family's vocabulary, carrying the claim that I was the one transgressing, that my insistence on the right thing was the real offense. "You did this to your family," I said. "I am addressing what you did." I did not hang up dramatically. I said goodbye and ended the call. I sat with my phone on the table in front of me and felt the particular steadiness of someone who has said the thing and is not shaking from having said it. I had expected to shake. I had expected the conversation to cost more than it had. Instead, I felt clear, the specific clarity of a person who has stopped managing something and has started addressing it. My father called that afternoon. My father, Robert, was the quieter of the two. Not passive, but slower to act, more likely to let my mother take the lead in family matters, and then to try to moderate the fallout. He had, I suspected, not fully understood the mechanism of what they had done until he saw it described in Frederick's letter. "I didn't know about the form," he said. "I want you to know that. I didn't know how your mother handled the documentation. I knew we were selling the cello. I didn't know Elena believed she was signing an appraisal form." I thought about this, about whether it was true and about whether it mattered if it was. "Did you think Elena would have agreed if she'd been asked directly?" I said. A long pause. "No," he said. "So you knew it required deception," I said. "You just didn't know the specific form of it." Another pause. "Yes," he said, quietly. "I suppose that's right." I appreciated the honesty. My father, when cornered by the truth, did not try to argue past it. This was one of the things I respected about him and had always respected about him, separate from the failures. "Dad," I said, "I need you to understand something. The cello was Gran's gift to Elena. Gran gave it deliberately, with intention. What you did was take something from a 91-year-old woman and an 18-year-old girl and use it for a swimming pool. I need you to sit with exactly that." He was quiet for a long time. "I know," he said finally. "I know." "The money needs to come back," I said. "I don't know how you manage that, but it needs to come back." "I'll manage it," he said. "And the pool?" I said. "The contract has been signed," he said, "but it hasn't started yet. I'll talk to Dana and Marcus. There are other options. I'll find another way." "Okay," I said. "Claire," he said. "I'm sorry. I want to say that clearly without qualification. What we did was wrong. I'm sorry." I sat with this. It was not enough, and it was something, and those two things could be true simultaneously. "Thank you," I said. "I'll let Frederick know you've committed to restitution." The money came back in 41 days, not the 30 the letter had demanded, but close enough, and the delay was the delay of people liquidating what they needed to liquidate to make it right. Frederick confirmed receipt. The transfer was legally documented. Elena's claim was settled. Dana called me. Once, brief, with a particular voice of someone who has been on the losing end of a situation they contributed to and is not entirely sure how to navigate the aftermath. She said she was sorry about the cello. She said the pool wasn't worth it. She said her kids had been disappointed. I said I was sorry her kids were disappointed. I said that wasn't Elena's problem to solve. There was a long pause, and then Dana said, "I know." And we ended the call, and I did not know when the next one would come, but I did not spend much energy on the question. September came. Elena's departure for Caldwell Conservatory was a Sunday morning, clear and cool, the particular quality of early autumn that made the city look like it had been recently clarified. We drove to Gran's apartment first, Elena and I in my car, with 2 suitcases and a cello case in the back. The old case, the Ferretti's case, which was what we had. We had ordered a proper case for the Stradivarius, a specific case recommended by the luthier in Cremona, who had been in communication with Frederick and with Gran throughout the summer, and it had arrived the previous week. Gran was waiting at the door. She was wearing the blue dress she saved for occasions she considered important, and she had her hair done, which she did herself still with the fierce independence of a woman who does not ask for help with things she can do herself. We went inside. Gran went to the wardrobe. She brought out the gray wool bundle and set it on the coffee table, and she looked at Elena and said, "Sit down." Elena sat. Gran unwrapped the cello. In the September morning light, it was different than it had been in the evening light of the first time Elena had seen it. The amber varnish caught the light differently, with a depth that spoke of 3 centuries of very careful maintenance and 30 or 40 years, before that maintenance began, of simply being used, being played every day by someone who loved it. It had the particular beauty of something that has been used by people who understood what it was for. Gran lifted it and held it out to Elena with both hands. "This is yours," she said. "It always was. I was simply waiting for September." Elena took it. She held it the way she had held it the first time, with the reverence of a musician who knows what she is touching. And she was quiet for a long moment. Then she looked at Gran. "Will you play something?" she said. "Before I go, will you play something on it?" Gran looked at her. "I haven't played in 4 years, she said. "I know," Elena said. "Play anyway." Gran sat down. She took the cello. She positioned it with the muscle memory of 60 years, and she picked up the bow, Elena's bow, which had been leaning against the music stand, and she played. It was not perfect. The 4 years of not playing showed in the places you would expect them to show, but the sound that came out of that instrument, the particular unmistakable quality of a great cello played by someone who knows it deeply, filled the small living room completely, and it was the most beautiful thing I had heard in years, and I sat on the moss-green sofa and did not try to hold anything back. She played 8 bars of the Bach she had played at Elena's 14th birthday, the piece she had played every time it mattered, the piece she had played as the final act before handing over what she was handing over. Then she stopped. She sat with the bow on the string and the sound in the room. She handed the cello back to Elena. "Now you," she said. Elena played. She played the same 8 bars on the same instrument, and the sound was entirely different and entirely continuous. Different because she was young and her technique was the technique of a contemporary player, and the music came from a different place than it had come from in Gran's hands. Continuous because the instrument was the same, the room was the same, the specific love of the thing was the same. Gran listened with her eyes closed and her hands folded in her lap, and the expression of someone who is receiving something they have been waiting a long time to receive. When Elena finished, Gran opened her eyes. "Yes," she said. "That's right. That's exactly right." Elena called me from Caldwell 3 weeks after she arrived. She was settled, she said. Her teacher had heard her play and had said something with the careful precision of someone who does not offer assessments cheaply. She was happy, she said. Not the performed happiness of someone reporting in, but the specific, grounded happiness of someone who has arrived somewhere they were supposed to be. "How's Gran?" she said. "I saw her yesterday," I said. "She's good. She started playing again, not every day, but a few times a week. She got out the old student instrument she kept in the closet." Elena was quiet for a moment. "I'm glad," she said. "She sends her love," I said. "Tell her—" Elena started. "Tell her I played the Bach this morning, the 8 bars, before my lesson. I play it every morning." I thought about Gran on the moss-green sofa with her eyes closed and her hands folded and the expression of someone receiving something they have waited for. "I'll tell her," I said. Outside my kitchen window, the city was going about its October business, ordinary and continuous and full of the lives of people who were each carrying their own accumulation of what mattered. I stood with my phone and thought about swimming pools and fraud and the bottom of a wardrobe and the sound of a cello in a small room on a September morning. I thought about Gran saying, "Don't worry, sweetheart." I thought about what had been waiting in that bottom drawer all along. 3 centuries of someone else's extraordinary work, held in trust by a woman who understood that some things are worth waiting to give, worth being careful with, worth protecting even from the people you love, until the right moment arrives and you can open your hands and let it go completely. The right moment had arrived. Elena was playing the Bach every morning at Caldwell Conservatory on a Stradivarius that had lived in a bottom drawer under a gray wool blanket, while a swimming pool was built and paid for and eventually, inevitably, drained. Things last at different rates. My grandmother had always known this. Now we all did.